So right now we're gonna have a talk about Block Model 3, A New Anatomy of the Block by Dante Alvarez. So thank you everyone. Thank you, Dante. Let's get started.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you for the for such an amazing conference. Um, right now, I'm going to talk about something we've been calling internally Block Model 3, but maybe it makes more sense described as it is in the plip. We're trying to improve the editing experience, right? So the goals. What are the goals of these changes that I'm proposing? To simplify the block system, to avoid CSS duplicates, to make the blocks predictable, and to improve the edit mode experience. So, how are we going to do this? By empowering the block, unifying the block, and give the block an anatomy. The anatomy concept I borrowed from the React Area components library in the React Area project. Like they have like a part of the documentation talks about the anatomy of their elements. And I think this is a wonderful, wonderful idea because we are clarifying what are the parts of this thing that we're talking about, what are the parts for, and then how they all behave together. So let's try to do that. Empowering the block. We want no more wrappers, just blocks. A block should be self-sufficient to handle everything about it. Like a block could be by itself, and there should be no need to extra elements to help the block do what it's supposed to do, right? And on a page layout, between the header and the footer, ideally nothing but blocks. When I say unifying the block, I mean to achieve a cross-contextual block. That means it should be the same block if I'm adding a page, if I'm editing a page, or if I'm viewing a page. There's no need to have different animals doing different things. If it's the same block, it should do the same thing. It doesn't matter the context. So now, let's talk about the proposed anatomy for the block. I will show some diagrams a little bit later, but I want to first explain the concepts. So the first one, we have a block outer container with the CSS class .block. We've all seen it. We've all worked with it. And what are the responsibilities? What's the job of this element? It receives the injected styles from the style wrapper, and it handles the spacing whenever the adjacent blocks have a different theme. And the Volto Light theme talk, I showed like how the themes are handled these days, and all of this is used to create like an automatic system about blocks and their adjacent blocks if they have a different theme. The next element is the block inner container. This one has a CSS class of .block-inner-container. And what it's responsible for? It is responsible to set the available width of the block's content. In Volto Light theme terms, it sets the block width. It can be layout width, default width, narrow width, or some other widths that are added to our system. It also is responsible for aligning the block's content within this available space, and it will handle the vertical spacing between blocks that have the same theme. In contrary to the previous element that we were talking about that handles when they are not the same theme. And then finally, the content, right? What do you want to put in your block? It doesn't matter. It could be text, it could be an image, it could be a button, it could be a map, whatever you want to put in that block. It's that simple. There is a feature that is also proposed here that has to do with simplifying the relationship among all the types of blocks that we have, because we've talked about how many available Volto blocks are out there, and pretending to create a matrix that will handle every possible combination of blocks, I don't think is the way to go. So the proposal here is to abstract general categories of the blocks and then handle the relationship based on the block category instead of the block type. Ideally, we will end up with a handful of categories that will apply for all blocks. For example, an inline, like a category inline block, which would be the slate block, the simplest example, we can have a heading, because even though it is similar, the slate block has its own little things, and the heading is a lot more of a simpler block, and it has a clear purpose. It's not just a random text block, right? Like, it's very defined why and what for do you use a heading. And an action block, for example, could be a block that is not giving much information to the user, is requesting an action from the user. The easiest example will be a button, right? A button is not giving me too much information. A button is requiring that I activate on it. This is just like a initial proposal, and we will have to figure out what is the minimum amount of categories that we need for to cover really most of the blocks that we have available. But I really think by abstracting that in this layer, we're going to simplify a lot, like the relationship among blocks. And well, it is injected also in the style wrapper. Right now, we can set the category of a block in the registry, and the blocks config is just another key. And it creates this class, the category dash, and then the class. Now we're gonna go to a more visual description of the elements that we're talking about. Right now, we are looking at default width case of a block. First, we're gonna go about the horizontal spacing. So we need to start with the idea that a block should go from end to end of our page layout. Like that needs to be a golden rule, so this system works. So if all we have between header and footer is a stack of blocks, then our layout becomes really simple. We have a header, and then we have a stack of blocks that go from side to side of the image. That's the 100% of our page layout. Right here, we are seeing on dark gray would be the inner container. Again, it handles the available width of the block's content, and it centers the content in this available width. Since the default width, for example, let's think about text is the easiest example. Even though it doesn't use the default, it uses an arrow. But if we wanted to have text in a page, maybe we don't want the first letter to start on the border left of the page and then end on the other extreme. So we need to offset it somehow. And this is the same case for an image, right? If we don't want an image to be completely full screen, we need to offset or limit the available space that it has. So this is responsibility of the inner container to offset right, offset left, which creates like a narrower layout for the content, while the block outer container that we see behind the yellow columns keeps going from edge to edge of the screen. Like that is not changing. We're only offsetting it, taking advantage of the block inner container. But we still have our super simple layout, header, block, block, block from edge to edge, and then footer, right? But what happens if, as I was saying, we have a default width, but now how does this work when I have a narrow width, for example, for paragraphs? So it's just as simple as increasing how much offset we want. But then let's go back to the example. What happens if I have an image, if I have a slider block that I do want it to go from edge to edge, right? Well, we just set them to 0. And then we have all the possibilities of width following the exact same rules. And there are some, but they're just a handful. We've done tests, and we haven't yet found like an issue in which this system really doesn't apply and doesn't just follow along the rules. I mean, of course, you need the right containers, but once that is in place, it just works. like that. And it makes it intuitive. Like now you know exactly what is changing when you're changing the available width for your block. And you know exactly which elements are taking care of this and how they are doing it. So again, we see the block outer container going from edge to edge of the page. That's great. We see the block inner container that matches the width because we want full width. And then the available content, the available space for the content also becomes the entire thing from edge to edge. There is a little caveat here. When we have a huge screen, maybe our layout width wouldn't be from edge to edge, right? But let's think about like a laptop-sized computer. This is it. Even though, like right now, for example, in the Volto Live Theme 6, we do have an option for full width. That means full width. So it doesn't matter if it's a huge screen, it will just go full. The layout, it is limited to 1440 pixels just to make it a little better and more readable with large screens. But thinking about a smaller screen, this is exactly what will happen, edge to edge. Now let's talk about the vertical spacing cases. As we can see, we have here 3 blocks. We can think of them maybe paragraphs. It doesn't matter. We wouldn't want the paragraph to be touching the paragraph below, right? So we need a little bit of space. This is a responsibility of the inner container that will just add a default. Right now, it's implemented in the Volto Live theme as a variable. So you just go and change the value of the default space you want between blocks, and then it will take care of it. This is, again, the example in which both previous and next blocks share the same color or the same theme. So but what happens when we have a different theme on the adjacent blocks? Well, for example, here we have a gray block, then a white block, and then again a gray block. And this is where the outer container comes into the game by adding this extra spacing that we decided it could be, or it actually is like a different feature. We're not talking about like the default spacing. We're talking about we have a block with one theme and then a block with a different theme. So separating these 2 features as the default distances for same theme blocks and having a different one also allows you to change exactly what you want in both cases, even though they follow a very similar idea. So here is a diagram with all the elements that I've been describing. Of course, this wouldn't be a very realistic case because we have all the possible spacings at the same time, right? So the idea of this image is just to show in one single place all the elements we're talking about and where they are located. The red one is part of the block outer container. That's what it does. And then the yellow ones are all responsibility of the block inner container. And in the center, we still have just our block content. Now I would like to show you how this looks on an actual page. So this is my page. It's a very simple page, but I'm gonna inspect it. And I think we're gonna start seeing some familiar faces. So as we can see, we have our container element, like for the page, and all we have is just blocks. This is where we start seeing some familiar faces. These spacings are part of the inner container, right? Because if we go up, this is it. Like it's just a block going from edge to edge. It's that simple. We can also see here, we have the category heading. And in a minute, I will show what happens when you have these categories, and then you can implement the relationships among different block categories. If we go for the slate block, we see the same thing. We have the block going from edge to edge. And if we look inside, we see, again, the block inner container with the left and right offset and the vertical default space. It is the same for the rest, for the other paragraphs, right? So, talking about the cross-contextual block. So what happens if I go into edit mode with this approach? We're right here. So it looks exactly like in view. We can do it again. Right? So it is the closest as probably we could get about what you get is what you see. So it's not confusing. If I'm looking the edit mode, how do I know exactly how much space will be between the elements? How do I know exactly from where to where on my page this element goes? This way, what we're showing on edit is what you'll get in view. I heard a comment from, I think it was David, that said that we're going to make it more obvious that you're in edit mode now because, you know, it looks the same. We added some style changes for the editing experience. For example, now when you select two blocks, it has this style. But the functionalities are exactly the same. We can keep selecting some of them not. We have a hover. And I want to now inspect these elements now that we're here in edit mode. So, familiar, we have a block. Inside of it, of course, in edit mode, we have a couple extra elements like buttons to delete the block, to move the block around. All of them are right here. You know, one could add more things if needed for a given block. And then we have our content. Let's look at the paragraph. We have the block. We have the same block inner container doing the same things as in view. What happens if, let's add a block with a different category. Let's add a button. And now let's inspect what is happening with the button. Again, we have a block. And we have its inner container doing exactly the same thing as it was in view. Since the block, the button block has a different category, we can see how, without doing anything, there's a bigger space between the paragraph and the button. This is a feature that has been in the Volto Light theme. It's just handled in a slightly different way. Since now we have the new order tab, the proposed editing experience includes these buttons. If we want to change a block, you know, maybe a little bit. Of course, if you want to drag it further, then probably this will be the way. All of these things that we were talking about, this is what it creates. Like, it creates a simpler, cleaner, more open editing experience that is a lot closer to what you get actually in the view, with all the features, changing the block width. Like, let's see actually what is changing here. We have our block width CSS prop that goes from narrow into default. And if we're looking at the inner container, we can see in orange the left and right offset, and now it has slightly more offset. When we talked about the block themes, let me do that now. What happens if we change the color block here? Let's see what changed. Now, our block outer container is taking care of this theme change in the adjacent blocks. So by adding also animations, we are making it easier for the user to know exactly what is changing instead of just like a blink where things are a little bit different. Is very clear. What are you moving? What is happening? And once again, you can see the end result of what your page is going to be, because exactly what you get in edit mode is what you get here. So this is in a prototype phase. We have been experimenting a lot with it, but we are very happy. We have noticed how it really simplifies how to work with blocks. It makes them intuitive, and it centralizes. If you want to change any of these aspects of layout, um, it's very clear where you need to go. And once you change it once, it's going to work for all the blocks in your system because they all share the same anatomy. So again, it is still in an experimental phase, but it's looking very good, and I really think is going like improving the editing experience is going to improve all the sites that we have out there. And for the developer part, I don't know, maybe I was too quick at it. But we no longer have the class. We no longer have the class blog dash editor dash then the type of block, and now we don't have nested elements that also have the block class, because if you have done some Volto work, probably you've seen that you go and write the styles for your view, and if you assign things to the class block, you might find some surprise elements that also have the class block inside of them. And this also forces you to write styles for the view and then write styles for edit mode. In this way, it doesn't matter in which context you are. All you need to style is your block once. We have been cutting down so much CSS, and I think I'm the happiest about that one, because now I only need to develop things once. Like I need to take care of my block just once, and I know it's going to behave exactly the same. It doesn't matter the context that it is in. So it is an effort to simplify for developers, to simplify for editors, which will lead to just a better user experience of our sites. I would love to hear comments and feedbacks from the community as we move along with this. We don't have all the answers yet. We have been trying just to make it as straightforward and general as possible. But I would love any type of feedback from other cases, other examples, and overall, how does this seem like it? Because it will be important to create a path about how can we make this more available for the community. That is basically it. I would like to use the rest of the time, to hear questions or comments if there are any.
So thank you very much, Dante. Thank you, everyone. Anyone? No questions? So, okay, right now we're going to have the lunch break. We'll be back